Now we are going to move to Dr. Ken Hoshikawa. Dr. Ken works at the Biological Resources and Post-Harvest Division of JIRCAS as a researcher since October 2018. And since May 2019, he has been working with World Vegetable Center to conduct collaborative research to develop heat-tolerant tomatoes and then genetic diversity of Amaranth species using research tools of genetics and then molecular biology. Dr. Ken, please start here.
Chair, thank you for my introduction. So first of all, I'd like to thank for giving me the great opportunity today. Okay, I start my presentation. So micronutrient deficiencies has become the more seriously problem. So which is called hidden hunger. So each year, 2.7 million deaths due to the insufficient intake of the micronutrients. About one-third of the children in low and middle income countries lack adequate vitamin A. So anemia caused by the dietary iron deficiency affects 250 million women of reproductive age worldwide. Malnutrition causes nearly half of the deaths in the children under 5, so the 2.6 million children each year. So according to our world in data, so the influence of these issues have showed more seriously in the low and middle income countries. So due to the accelerated population growth rate and urbanization, so compared with that in the developed country. Many more people have been malnourished recently. So compared with the hunger and overweight. So because their diet is imbalanced. The imbalanced diet leads to the increased rate of the obesity, heart disease, and other chronic disease. So in the developing country, people might lack the money to purchase the diversity in diet. So compared with the people in the developed country. So however, so no matter where it occurred, so lack of the diversity in diet so leads to the same result, which is poor health. So the global food system has a dependent on the few crop species, so such as rice, maize, and wheat, so to supply the protein and calories. So there are the considerable challenges in achieving the food and nutrition security in the developing country. So as one of the suggestions to tackle the global issues, new strategies that place equal emphasis on the human nutrition, health, and environmental sustainability need to be considered. Vegetable use may be able to contribute to solve the global issue. So there are many kinds of the potential for the vegetable production for that. So vegetable production can give farmers a higher income, so income per unit area than a major crop. The vegetable can produce multiple times per year in a relatively small area. Sometimes the farmers who produce the vegetables have a higher net profit than the farmers who produce the major crops only. Women can easily join the vegetable value chain. So despite such advantages, the current common cultivar are insufficient on the nutrition and adapting to the extreme climate change. So it's necessary to create the new breeding materials to improve the nutritional component and also adapting to the global warming. I show the vegetable research in JIRCAS. So my research's final goal is to improve the health and increase income in Africa and Asia. So to achieve the final goal, I developed the breeding materials showing the benefit on the yield, cultivation, nutrition, post-harvest. So I will distribute the seed through the breeding company, World Vegetable Center, and directly to the people. So to develop the breeding materials, I'm focusing on the tomato and the amaranth. So in this presentation, I mentioned about the Amaranth's project as an opportunity to tackle the global issue. Use of the orphan crops. It's made more effective. So orphan crops are underutilized crop species and traditional vegetables in Asia and Africa. So orphan crops include the vegetable, fruits, grain, and roots, and is limited are limited on to the specific geographical location, and orphan crops are not commonly traded internationally. So here is the most popular orphan crops such as a spider plant, moringa, nightshade, cowpea, rice-paddy herb, and amaranth. So, and I show the micronutrient content of the cabbage and other orphan crops. Orphan crops have a high accumulation of the nutrition. So like beta carotene, vitamin C, and vitamin E, iron, and more. So I show the summary of the importance for the research of the orphan crops. Exploiting underutilized species and genetic resources referred to orphan crops could be one of the useful approaches for resolving the adaptability to environmental alteration, biodiversity preservation, and the improvement of the nutrient quality and quantity to ensure food security. However, the potential roles of the orphan crops in adapting to the global issues have not yet been validated and understood. So, and they have been neglected in the modern plant breeding technology for their lack of the significance in the economy and agriculture in developed countries. So some researchers at JIRCAS are working on the quinoa, so which is one of the orphan crops from South America. So in my project, I'm focusing on the amaranth. So in some kinds of amaranth species, I'm focusing on the amaranth tricolor called Hyuna by Japanese. Amaranth tricolor is an indigenous leafy amaranth species. So Amaranth tricolor has been cultivated in the South or Southeast Asia mainly. But also the Amaranth tricolor has been distributed in the Africa, Europe, and America. Amaranth tricolor has a morphological diversity. I show the table of the nutrient content of the common leafy vegetable in the 100 grams of the fresh leaves. So the orange color shows the high accumulation of each nutrient content. So Amaranth leaf show the high accumulation of the vitamin and the essential trace element, and also amino acid accumulation equal or greater to than the spinach. So, however, Amaranth has not been investigated so far for the low economic demand in the developed country. So I mentioned about the positive trait of Amaranth, but also Amaranth has a negative trait. So in my project, I'm focusing on the oxalic acid, which is the main component of the bitter taste. So accumulation of the oxalic acid in the Amaranth is higher than that in the spinach. So dietary oxalic acid is a lower calcium and magnesium availability, and is a potential risk factor for the kidney stone development. To accelerate the vegetable use of the amaranth in the developing country, effective breeding system to generate the cultivar with improved trait for the health and taste is essential without the change in the genetic background. So effective breeding system can be achieved by applying modern plant breeding techniques. To apply the modern plant breeding techniques, so we analyze the genetic diversity to improve the amaranth's genetic resource. So genetic diversity provides a genetic marker for the breeding. So to evaluate genetic diversity of amaranth tree genetic resource, we collected the amaranth genetic resource preserved in the World Base and the USDA. After DNA extraction by using the next generation sequencer, we identified over 5,000 SNPs data. So using the SNPs data, we analyzed the phylogenetic tree structure analysis and PCOA. So finally, we constructed the core collection. So the pie graphs show the proportions of the accessions of specific subpopulation in each country. So in India, Bangladesh, and China, the proportion of the Q1, Q2, Q3 were significantly higher than those in the other countries. And the proportion of the admixture group were highest in the Malaysia and Indonesia. So the Q1, Q2, Q3 and the admixture groups. So associations with their geographic distribution. In conclusion, we identified a common SNPs. We evaluated genetic diversity of amaranth tree color genetic resource. We created a amaranth tree color core collection. For the future, we have measured the nutritional component to improve the treat for health and taste without the change in the genetic background. So finally, I appreciate the many collaborators and the funding agency for the project. Thank you for your attention.
Pepijn is a senior scientist at World Vegetable Center based in Thailand. As agriculture economist and development studies expert, he leads the research programs on enabling impact and healthy diets. His work focuses on how to enable vegetables to optimally contribute to poverty reduction, health, and environment. Dr. Pepijn, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. I also would like to start the seminar with thanking JIRCAS for inviting us and the panelists for this seminar. Very interesting. One risk, of course, of having 5 presenters presenting on the same topic and then coming last is that there's some slides there that might have been presented already. So forgive me for that. I might skip a few slides, I realized, in my presentation. Yeah, I think many of the presenters have been alluded to this key change in our food systems. Okay, the global food systems are changing. We are having a change, of course, from like home cooked foods and little processed foods with a high diversity and good nutritional quality to increasingly industrialized foods, highly processed, less diversity and a poor nutritional quality. And that has far-reaching effects, of course, on the health of the populations. That's a change has happened, of course, in higher income countries over decades. But the worry that we have is that we see the same change in very low income countries happening within maybe a single decade or within even a few years. This is a slide from Nepal, and Nepal, this happened very quickly, basically after the earthquake in 2015. A lot of money came into the system as reconstruction efforts, and most of the people who reconstructed their houses made snack shops from their houses and start selling ultra processed foods. So you have within maybe a 5-year period, you have an enormous influx of cash and ultra processed foods into rural communities. With, of course, dramatic changes to the local food systems. Okay, the underlying changes here, of course, we know urbanization. Urbanization is a key driver, and in 2050, 2 in 3 people will be living in cities. 80% of the food consumed globally will be in cities. So that is a huge effect on how we consume food and the food environment. Of course, it's associated also with income growth. When people have more income, they will purchase more food rather than produce their own food. Demographic changes, of course, smaller families, women often employed in the labor force, therefore has a need less time for cooking meals. Smaller families and the need for convenience, of course, then increases. And of course, the aggressive marketing of foods by multinational food companies, the brands that we are familiar with in Japan and Europe, US, are now globally available, even in the smallest areas and the most isolated and rural locations where we visit in rural settings, we find those global brands present nowadays. Now, I want to link that to the role of like vegetables because, of course, vegetables are under pressure because we already have vegetable consumption is far below what is recommended globally. So it's already enormous challenge to have people consume enough vegetables. But what we see is that when incomes rise, that vegetable consumption does not increases very little. In some countries, even we find a negative effect. So when incomes rise for certain population groups, we find a decline in vegetable consumption, which is a real worry. But we also see changes within the vegetable group because we see a change from demand for like traditional, mostly leafy vegetables, into the direction of mostly global vegetables, that you see in this photo. And that this will skip here. That comes together with a change of informal feed systems to more formal seed systems, because those global vegetables, often the seed cannot be produced locally. So you can then have a reliance on imported seed, especially, or purchased seeds. We also see a change from low input use, where farmers often own those traditional vegetables hardly used any pesticides or fertilizers, to those global vegetables where the use of pesticides and fertilizers is kind of is very important and sometimes very high. Of high agrobiodiversity systems to low agrobiodiversity systems, and as the other presenters already showed, from nutrient-dense crops to still healthy vegetables, but less nutrient-dense vegetables. This Ken already showed. I think we don't need to show it again. Traditional vegetables and their wild relatives. And the problem here is that a lot of the traditional vegetables are under threat. So they're poorly conserved, first of all. So we don't have many gene banks that have a collection of traditional vegetables or vegetables in general, especially in Africa. So a lot of the African vegetable biodiversity, but also of the Asian one, is actually poorly conserved. So if we lose it from farmers' fields, it's lost forever. So that's a real worry. That biodiversity of vegetables, this paper together, I think, is from biodiversity, the agrobiodiversity vegetables is the highest probably in Africa and Southeast Asia. So that's important to keep in mind because these are the two regions where it is most under threat. So World Vegetable Center has been focusing on those two regions as priorities for us to collect and safeguard biodiversity of vegetables. This is a study that maps the agrobiodiversity hotspots of vegetables and identified particular areas in Africa where the collection missions should probably focus on, and that's what we are currently also doing to go to those areas and collect as much as possible. We have a gene bank in Taiwan, which is the largest public resource for vegetable biodiversity globally. But we also have a gene bank in Arusha, Tanzania, where we have a sub-collection for African vegetables. And currently it has about 5,000 accessions stored there. And in the coming 3 years, we would like to expand that to about 15,000 accessions. And the gene bank is kind of renovated for this purpose. We also have developed global conservation strategies. Those are available for eggplant and cucurbits. They're forthcoming also for chili pepper and yardlong and bean cowpea. And also I understood there's a diversity or a strategy forthcoming for traditional vegetables. So to be more strategic in how we conserve, safeguard, conserve, and also use this biodiversity. In this second part of my presentation, I would like to focus on the questions how to keep those traditional vegetables on our plate. And I would like to structure this according to our 4 A's of making them available, affordable, creating access, and stimulating their acceptability or making them desirable. Firstly, in terms of availability, many of those traditional vegetables they have a low productivity, and that's mostly because these are low input systems, but also because the varieties that are available have not been approved. There has not been much research on those varieties to improve them. So seed is available from the local informal seed sector, which performs reasonable, but it's not competitive to many other crops. So improving that productivity is important. Then, of course, for many traditional vegetables, the marketing systems are functioning very poor. These are highly perishable crops where timeliness of your supply chain is critical. So you need to be able to harvest it, send it off to a buyer, and it must reach a consumer within a day, otherwise you lose your crop. But those systems are especially not working for traditional vegetables. Yeah. So you have the high post-harvest losses, and because of that, the price is actually much relatively high. The farmers get a low price, consumers pay often a high price, just because of the losses. So key actions for us, we need to improve particular traditional vegetables. We can't do that for every vegetable, of course. We need to be selective which ones we select for improvement. But Ken's example of Amaranth is, for example, is one vegetable because it is so globally used in both Africa, Asia, Central America. That's worthwhile to improve for Amaranth. We have to work with the public and private sector because we do actually want to have the private sector involved and make those seeds of, for example, Amaranth, African eggplant available. And in Africa, that's working quite well. So those two crops are now widely available, produced by the private sector. So many farmers can have access to improved seeds. And we also, like biodiversity, we also promote the use of these resources, particularly through schools. We also find school meal programs and school gardens effective tools to introduce this biodiversity and to get children interested in those crops again, because they might not know them otherwise. Secondly, affordability. So as I said, like the low yields and high post-harvest losses increases the price of those crops too high. And then on top of that, the price is often very unstable. So seasonally, we find high supplies, a low price, and then then they disappear from the market. So we need to stabilize the prices, but also like address the issue of losses there. One way of doing that for us is to organize farmers into groups and having them produce as a group those vegetables, so they gain more market power. And then also, when they are organized as a group, we can train them better and develop the capacity to grow the vegetables, improve seed saving, post-harvest management. For individual farmers, it's very difficult to do, but once we group them, we are able to improve the system. Thirdly, like the access, even if the vegetables are available and the price is acceptable, still many people, consumers, might not be able to access them. And that is often because these vegetables are not available in supermarkets. There's nice photos in Kenyan supermarkets, but generally we don't find them often in formal markets. They're mostly sold through informal markets. So that's important that we address that. And there are, of course, vegetables in general and traditional vegetables in particular are often absent in institutional meal provision. When we look at school meal programs in Asia and Africa, we find a heavy focus on the staples, on the beans, vegetable oils. We hardly find any vegetables usually included there in those school meals. So including them there is important, as well as working with restaurants to include traditional vegetables in their menus, because often we don't find them there. That's actually basically what I said. So it is a photo from Benin, where the team of World Veg has introduced this in Benin school gardens with the World Food Program, and that there it was quite successful to do that. Created a lot of enthusiasm. And that's, of course, acceptance, because even if the vegetables are available, affordable, and even people could have access to them, people are still often not willing to eat those vegetables. And that's because of the low preference among certain population groups for eating vegetables in general and leafy vegetables in particular. And then we're thinking about particularly men, adult men and children. Don't want to be associated with eating leafy vegetables. So how to change that? That needs promotional campaigns, behavioral change campaigns, and there's still like negative social attitudes about vegetables, traditional vegetables in Africa, but also globally, I think, that we need to break and work on. And that's basically what I said. So in conclusion, I think there's enormous global challenges about how to keep vegetables in general and traditional vegetables on people's plates. It's not so easy, and the trends don't look good. So it needs an increased effort to do that together with many organizations and governments. And there's a real risk of that vegetables are not just declining demand, but also that we lose some of this diversity in farmers' fields if we are not careful and conserve it. So we need to work on the availability, affordability, access, desirability, and we don't need to do that in this separate ways. We need to link those areas up so that when we increase the availability, we also think about the consumption and use of those vegetables. So a lot of more effort is needed. Lastly, I would like to thank Martin van Zonneveld who helped me to prepare this presentation, my colleague at World Vegetable Center. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pepijn. Now let us begin Q&A session. I think from all the presentators, there's some key messages emerging. The globalization of the food system over the past few decades has resulted in the 75% of the world food being derived from only 12 plants and 5 animal species. And the consequences of this has been the loss of agricultural biodiversity with negative impacts on planetary and human health. And restoring agricultural biodiversity is necessary not only to improve food system resilience, but also to provide nutritious food to people. Today, we are privileged to have leading experts to discuss the role of science and research in preserving the diversity and cultural value of food genetic resources while meeting the nutritious environment and economic needs of communities in Africa, Asia, and Americas. Let us take advantage of their presence by asking some questions. And actually, I prepared some questions, but today, because this is a hybrid event, we have good audience here. So please let me take advantage of the audience if you want to make a question to the speakers. Yes, please let me go around with mic.
Thank you so much to all the presenters. These are brilliant presentations, and particularly being a public health nutritionist, I like those local indigenous vegetables and fruits promotion part, because this type of production can only reduce the pressure on the global vegetables, what we call, like tomatoes or cabbage and cauliflower. I have one question to the speaker who was, I would say specifically to the speaker who was talking about the amaranth. But the question is also as a whole to other speakers, like, since we are talking about the most vulnerable people in low and middle income countries, particularly in low income countries, so while targeting vegetables or fruits production and consumption, are we targeting based on the nutrient problem in those countries? I like, maybe different country has in different geographic locations, they have different problem nutrients. What I mean here, that deficiency in terms of like some countries could have calcium deficiency highest, some could have other nutrient deficiencies. So the programs that are promoting amaranth or some other specific local indigenous vegetables, are they considering those nutrient gaps? That is my question. Thank you.
Can Dr. Hoshikawa answer this question, or partly, and maybe you can also ask your colleagues here.
Yeah, we do that partly and partly not. We have to keep in mind that vegetables, that people don't eat the same vegetable every day. Yeah? So vegetables is different from staples that you don't have. But the diversity is probably more important than trying to put the nutrients in one vegetable, or saying like, no, you need to eat a lot of amaranth, right? Because you have this calcium deficiency, for example. So I think our approach has been for World Vegetable Center more like make people eat a diversity of different vegetables rather than promoting them to eat a lot of amaranth, for example. Because we think that people have this diversity will supply you a diverse range of different nutrients, phytonutrients that are all required. But of course, that can be sometimes when we think about what vegetables could fit in the system, we do think about the nutrient intake gaps, of course, and try to select the particular ones. But at the same time, we usually the diversity is more important than the particular.
Thanks for that question. Provocative question. Just to add what Pepijn was saying, we follow in the Global Diet Quality Project the healthy diet recommendations of the World Health Organization, and that also is not, it's not nutrient based. So it's more for a healthy diet. The World Health Organization is recommending 400 grams of fruits and vegetables. So again, I think diversity is one of those key concepts for consumers to understand, but it's also in general within the promotion of diversity, really trying to strike in consumer mind and also producer mind that, globally we need to produce more and consume more quantity of fruits and vegetables. So I think it's helpful to kind of break out a little bit of that mindset of, which specific linear programming are we doing for the, like which nutrients, and realize that fruits and vegetables in general are very nutrient dense. We of course should do the food composition, but we can just have the concept in our mind that the more diversity, the more quantity of fruits and vegetables is going to be a good thing for our health and also the health of the planet. Because a lot of those come from trees, right? A lot of them come from nitrogen fixing plants. And so these are good things also for our environment. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Is that address?
Maybe to add that you saw the 210 species of leafy vegetables found in Kenya. It's only a small proportion which has been analyzed. So the data is not there for many of these. But I also support the others that we need to promote diversity, and by promoting diversity, the process will cover those nutrients which are deficient in those communities.
Thank you so much. Is that enough for your question? Thank you so much. Now another question.
Sorry, my name is Waliu Amusa Mpati, Professor Waliu from Benin. We were late. Sorry about that. That is not the story. So I just want to ask regarding the diversity. Are you also dealing with the neglected food, who are rich in nutrients, but people that don't know it? So I think it's also important to identify this kind of legume or leafy vegetable and fruits who may be helping people normally to more diversify, to have a lot of, let's say, plants or leafy vegetable available for them, because they are just moving around, but they don't know it. Or sometimes they think that that is for poor people, but it is something which is really rich, nutrient dense. So I don't know if you also deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone can address this question? Dr. Gina?
I think a partial answer to your question, Professor Waliu, is the case study that we raised looking at school meals. And there's a lot of different countries who are focusing on school meals. The case study from our paper was a school meal program in Kenya. And so that's a really good opportunity to combine nutrition education of the youth generation, you know, the younger generation. So you're bringing back their cultural foods into their diets, into their school system, but at the same time training them about the nutritional values of those foods and also the importance of eating a diverse diet. So Japan has a really good school meal system that incorporates that element of nutrition education. But in this example from Kenya, the same thing. So the children who participated in the program increased their knowledge of the nutritional value of the locally grown nutrient dense traditional foods. So that's just one example. I'm sure maybe World Vegetable, because you said you're focusing on trying to get men and children also. I mean, another example, I lived in Italy for 16 years, and that Italians have a very strong food culture, I think similar to the Japanese. And so from a very young age, my son went to school when he was age 3, 4, and 5, and they teach them at that age 3, age 4, age 5, to consume the Italian fruits, the Italian vegetables. There's no mindset that of the children that, oh, don't eat this one, it's a vegetable, no, we don't like it. They don't teach that. They teach exactly the opposite. Eat all your fruits, eat all your vegetables. It's good for you. It's part of our culture. It's part of our heritage. This is what we do. And I think more countries, including my own, United States, need to adopt that type of messaging to the very, very young. And then you grow up thinking this is normal and this is how we eat, not the opposite. Once you get, you know, you're allowed to be picky as a child, you're allowed to be picky, and then, okay, you'll outgrow that. And all of a sudden you'll learn how to eat your fruits and vegetables. That's not, you know, you need to teach the really young kids.
Thank you. Is that enough? Okay. Another question. Could you identify yourself?
Thank you. My name is Isaac Otieno. I'm a student here at Tokyo University of Agriculture. And I'm also conducting a study on wild plant species and doing nutrient content analysis. But at the same time, I'm looking forward to determine the bioactive compounds relating to the functionalities of these foods. So in regard to the presentation that have been given, I agree with you 100%. There are numerous challenges that face functional biodiversity, which I believe is the core of our food system. But as it is now, the challenges are supposed to be addressed in a multifaceted approach, and I believe most of them have been mentioned here. But I only want to ask a number of questions. One of the questions that I would like to ask to Dr. Kennedy is in regard to the statistics that you've shared. Do you think it's high time that we have to think about our food pyramids and revise our food pyramids? Because, like for example, in the case of Kenya, we've been using our food pyramid for a very long time, and we have never revised it, despite the fact that there are now instances where non-communicable diseases relating to nutrition are increasing. So do you think there's a need for us to revise some of our food pyramids? And then the second question is in regard to the mere fact that we have identified a number of numerous wild species, and there's need for us to do food composition analysis, because I believe that is the basis of us as nutritionists and also from other disciplines. That will be the only way for us to promote the awareness of these foods. So without knowing the food composition content, it's challenging for us to promote the awareness. So what could be the best approach for us to escalate this food composition analysis, cognizant of the fact that the rate of extinction and endangering of these species is on the rise? And then again, in terms of policy, I'd like to also ask that for the indigenous knowledge, what could be the best way of protecting the indigenous knowledge that comes from the locals? Because we are aware sometimes the locals are a bit reserved in terms of giving information in regard to a number of foods, maybe in terms of food functionalities. But maybe once they give out the information, other players will come and maybe through value addition take advantage of the information that they've been given for profit making. So how do we protect the indigenous knowledge of the locals in regard to the indigenous foods? So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe the Dr. Kennedy can address the first question he raised to you.
Yes, thanks, Isaac, for all those great reflections and the questions. I do think that it is very important to have a system to review your food-based dietary guidelines. Some countries already, have thought of that, and they, for example, have a review every 5 years or so, because obviously, things do need to be updated from time to time. One of the sessions at the recent conference, again, it's the International Congress of Nutrition that was hosted this year by Japan in Tokyo, was actually on the subject of food-based dietary guidelines for Africa. That presentation was given by Dr. Namakula Kovic, who's the president of the African Nutrition Sciences body. And so what she stressed, which I thought was a very good point, was that there's a large opportunity throughout the continent of Africa because many countries don't have food-based dietary guidelines yet. And so there's quite an opportunity for those countries. And I think you're alluding to the fact that maybe Kenya's could and should be updated. And when you go through that updating, you should really have your own country's food biodiversity in your mind. So she gave examples of Zambia where they specifically talk, you'll like this, Dr. Morimoto, they specifically say, please remember your wild fruits your wild vegetables. They give the examples by name in the food-based dietary guidelines of what those species are. It's a little bit rare. I mean, but I think it should become more commonplace. The same, like Brazil also is a good country to kind of refer to when you're updating your food-based dietary guidelines. They took sort of like a regional agroecological zone approach. They focus on seasonality, they focus on region, they focus on local and place-based context-specific foods. So, and then I guess in terms of your question on food composition, I 100% agree with you. And I think you are familiar with the Periodic Table of Foods Initiative, which is going to analyze 1,800 new foods, like food biodiversity, not, you know, ultra processed foods, but diverse foods around the planet. Japan is already a partner in that, NARO. So that's another thing, you know, maybe we could discuss Japan's interest in getting a little bit more involved with that. Is the more people come together with a like mind and fund these types of initiatives, I think the more we can do. And then in the world of food composition, there's already a very nice network called InFoods, IN Foods. And so what's really nice about that is it's regional, you know, there are regional bodies that look at food composition together. And so you have sort of this network already that you can tap into when you're interested in knowing about food composition. But happily, because of the Periodic Table of Foods initiative, I think we're going to kind of see some reinvigorated interest in that most basic of nutritional sciences, looking at what is actually the nutrient composition of a lot of these traditional and indigenous wild foods.
Thank you so much. Is that sufficient? Okay, indigenous knowledge too, Dr. Patrick.
Can I help with that? I think on the question of local people providing information, and then the question of benefit sharing is addressed by what we call the Nagoya Protocol. The Nagoya Protocol gave guidelines on how countries should address this issue. And in Kenya, we are in the process of domesticating that. Back in 2016, we put together a bill which went through Parliament, and that is now law. That when you access knowledge from local communities, when they provide knowledge, you have to go through a certain process, and one involves prior informed consent. Of course, that's standard protocol, and then you also enter into what we call full disclosure, why you are getting the information, how you intend to use the information. And then thirdly, after disclosing the purpose, why you need the information, thirdly, you need to enter into an agreement. Suppose this information is commercialized, how do you share the benefits? So you enter into what we call access and benefit sharing agreement. These are all explained in the Nagoya Protocol. And many countries are now adopting this. They are domesticating that protocol. And I think next time we go to the field, that's a procedure we need to follow. Yes, thanks.
Thank you. One more very short one. We are running out of time, so.
Sorry, I like your point. Sorry, I like your point of domestication of, let's say, plants, life vegetable. But the last step, I would like to know if in the procedure, do you finally come to the analysis of nutrient value of this domesticated food? Do you come to that point at least?
Yeah. So if I'm a scientist and you provide the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge,
Yeah.
and down the line, if I happen to commercialize that knowledge, for example, if I do analysis, I find it's rich in vitamin C, and that vitamin C can be used in fortification, for example, and I commercialize that, then I am obligated by Nagoya Protocol and also this country rules now that I should go back to the community which provided that knowledge and see how we can share the benefits. It's normally a certain percentage. You know the story of the rooibos tea, for example, in South Africa, where communities provided information about the rooibos, and then that rooibos now is a global product, and the communities that provided that initial information now get benefits from the company that produces rooibos.
Yes,
Yes.
I agree with you. I think it's a kind of how to valorize leafy vegetable plants. Thank you, really.
So in one way, it doesn't stop others from exploiting the resource, but you enter into an agreement with a community that provides the knowledge so that it benefits as well.
Okay, there are so many questions from the floor. So very short one and two.
Thank you very much. I'm Sam Boutrano from Benin also. I'll try to use my small English to try to make a comment. I think that the promotion of vegetables should be integrated in a holistic approach of life improving. I would like to take just a short example from my country. Since many years, we try to promote some leafy vegetables such as moringa. And at the end of the day, the situation is that moringa, which was not really considered in the past, is currently well consumed, leaves are dried. But the problem is that moringa is going to the marketing. So at the end of the day, in some villages, it's not possible no more to have this moringa for children, for mothers. So I think that it's important not only to promote some product, vegetables or fruits, but to try also to improve the life condition of people. If not at the end, it's possible that these products, the vegetables, this fruit, they use it only for marketing, and they will abandon the focus on nutrition and feeding practices. It's important also to take into account this problem because we have it also for baobab in our country also. I don't know what you think about this point. Thank you.
Maybe I can take another question. Yes,
One
just
small comment. I mean, like at the beginning, I didn't say it just to give chance everyone to talk about. Definitely, there is no argument about diversity in production. But given that, you know, the projects or programs providing like such as seeds and technology to increase the production. So we always have to focus on certain vegetables or fruits while projects or programs are supporting production. So in those cases, I mean, I would recommend that first cultural preferences should be considered along with nutrient density of the fruits and vegetables because, you know, all the vegetables and fruits are not the same way nutrient rich. So since we are working for the people who are poor and very poor households and they cannot buy lots of fruits and vegetables. So while promoting or distributing seeds or technology, given the nutrient content would be the much more maximizing the efforts that the communities can enjoy the food, I mean, good quality food, maintaining their nutrient availability in the diet. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe it's a very challenging question, but anyone can answer. The first one is like a how to say the too much commercialization of moringa, so it's the local children are a little bit, you know, left behind. Maybe Dr. Patrick can make us very quick answer.
Yeah. I think it comes to boils down to the reason why we are here. We are trying to promote diversification. If we diversify enough and not to depend on just moringa, I think that might be sorted in a way. But also, when we promote, sometimes we may promote to the extent of depriving the household of access to these things. So we have to be careful. We've seen it in Nairobi when we promoted traditional vegetables, and some of them became like gold to a point where the poor people cannot no longer access them. We need to be aware of that. When you go to the market, supermarkets now, traditional vegetables are more expensive than exotics. So, and that can deprive poor communities of access to traditional vegetables.
And for the last question? Yeah, but the time is running out. So very short here.
Because, sorry, just to contribute, I think he's making a very important point because we are promoting, let's say, vegetable, but for the poor people, they can't have access. I have an example in the National Council of Nutrition in my country. I'm representing the university in this council. To overcome this kind of problem, we write down a project that can be promotion of this moringa in rural area by setting, we get seeds, we go to some targeted area, poor area, rural area, and then we try to grow with people. We make them together. We show them how to grow, how to take care of this moringa. We go step by step, area by area in rural areas so that they can by themselves continue to have this moringa food, moringa plants and eat it. So it is a kind of nutritional education, but also agriculture put together to help them to have access to this interesting moringa plant. I think that is an example we are trying also in National Council of Nutrition in Benin. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are really running out of time, and he's really, wrapping up the whole discussion. So please excuse me, and we have some questions from the online audience, but we have to excuse that the time is really running out. But we just try to reply to some of the questions we received online. Just please let me wrap up this panel session and thank all the speakers first for your insightful comments. I think local foods need to be mainstreamed in the policy and scientific debates. And to do so, we need to make sure the local foods should be incorporated in nutrition assessments and in interventions, as well as extension system and policies, not really, excluding local communities. And at the same time, science has a role to play to unlock the beneficial nutrition potential of local foods while controlling undesirable traits. Still, in order to mainstream local foods, addressing supply-side bottlenecks is not sufficient. I think an integrated approach is needed to induce behavioral changes to improve acceptability of traditional vegetable and inclusive development. Thank you so much. Now, please let me introduce Dr. Kazuo Nakashima, Program Director of Food Program of JIRCAS, to make a few concluding remarks.
So, distinguished participants, on behalf of the organizers, I'd like to give a few concluding remarks for this seminar. Food derived from local landscape, meaning local ecosystem based on land and nature, such as water, soil, air, animals, and plants, provide an important source of nutrition and livelihood for communities in Africa and Asia. Today's seminar featured invited experts from the International Union of Nutritional Sciences, Alliance of Biodiversity International, and SEAT, and the World Vegetable Center, who shared their experiences on how to apply science and traditional knowledge to effectively utilize food from these local landscapes to improve nutrition and enhance livelihoods. From the presentations and lively Q&A session, we have gained a great deal in identifying the challenges as well as opportunities to unlock the potentials of local food diversity in meeting the nutritional, environmental, and economic needs of target communities while preserving their genetic resources and cultural values. In conclusion, diverse foods obtained from local landscapes, including traditional vegetables and orphan crops, are essential components of local livelihoods while contributing to agricultural biodiversity with ecological and socio-economic sustainability outcomes. And to achieve agricultural diverse, thus resilient food systems, which are beneficial both for planetary and human health, local food needs to be mainstreamed in the policy and scientific debates. With local foods, we should think globally and act locally. The hybrid format also facilitate a wider dissemination of the overall message we would like to impart from this seminar. And we hope that through this seminar, we are able to provide an opportunity for exchange of ideas among researchers, students, technology extension specialists, and policy makers from around the world. On behalf of JIRCAS, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to Dr. Yasuyuki Morimoto, who gave an introduction of this seminar, and all our invited speakers, Dr. Gina Kennedy, and Dr. Patrick Mantiu, Dr. Ken Hoshikawa, and Dr. Pepijn Schreinemachers. JIRCAS is also very grateful to organize this seminar with the Alliance of Biodiversity International CIAT. And finally, I'd like to thank all the seminar participants, the on-site and online audience, as well as everyone involved in planning and management of this event. We hope that messages from this seminar will contribute to your future activities and to global food and nutrition security. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nakashima. We are now closing the seminar. Thank you both online and then physical participants. We hope you really enjoyed this seminar. Thank you so much.